What we're looking at here is a Sumerian tablet that actually shows the tree of life, flanked by divine beings. You can see here the Anunnaki on each side.
There is a room in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum that most tour groups skip entirely. It isn't listed in the main brochure. The staff who work there call it the storage wing. And sitting in that storage wing, inside a climate-controlled case that hasn't been photographed for a public exhibit in over 30 years, is a clay tablet that changes everything we think we know about the ancient world. The tablet was recovered from a dig site in southern Iraq in the early 1900s. It sat in a crate for decades before a researcher cataloged it as part of a collection of administrative records from Eridu, the city the Sumerians consistently identified as the first city ever built on Earth. Not one of the oldest, the first. And when scholars finally translated the section of this tablet that had been labeled as unclear, possibly ceremonial, they found something that couldn't be explained away as ritual poetry or priestly mythology. They found measurements, precise architectural measurements describing a structure built beneath the surface of the Persian Gulf. Not beside it, not near it, beneath the ocean floor itself. And it described an entrance. This is not a story about mythology. The Sumerians didn't write mythology the way we use that word today. They wrote records. They wrote the way a civil engineer documents a project. They recorded what they observed, what they were taught, and what they were instructed to preserve. And what this tablet preserves is a technical account of a facility that, by any honest reading of the text, should not have been possible to build 5,000 years ago, should not have been possible to conceive of 5,000 years ago. And yet, there it is in the clay, chambers carved into underwater bedrock, a vertical shaft engineered to function as an airlock, a lighting system that required no fire and consumed no fuel, a power source the Sumerians described as drawing from the heartbeat of the earth itself. The name the Sumerians gave this structure was the Abzu. Scholars have translated that word variously as the deep, the primordial waters, the underground ocean. But when you read the technical tablets rather than the religious hymns, the Abzu is something far more specific. The cuneiform character used to describe it combines the symbol for built structure with the symbol for deep water. Not a natural formation, a construction project, an engineered base situated below the seabed of the ancient Persian Gulf, in a region the Sumerians placed at the exact point where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once met the coastline, a coastline that modern geological surveys have confirmed sat nearly 60 miles further inland than it does today. That matters because it means the entrance the tablet describes, the access point documented in enough detail to leave behind what amounts to navigational instructions, that entrance was once on dry land. It wasn't underwater. The Anunnaki didn't descend into the sea. They descended into the ground. And then the sea rose around it and the entrance went with it. The flood the Sumerians wrote about wasn't metaphor. It was the end of the last ice age. And the water that swallowed the entrance also swallowed the civilization that built it. If ancient lost civilizations and suppressed archaeological discoveries are what you're interested in, subscribe now. I cover the evidence mainstream academia won't touch every single week. And what I'm about to show you about this tablet is something most researchers won't discuss in public. The tablet describes the Abzu not as a single chamber, but as a tiered complex. 7 levels, each serving a distinct operational function, each built deeper than the last into the bedrock beneath the seafloor. The Sumerians recorded these levels with the same methodical precision they used to document grain storage and tax collection. The first level, closest to the entrance shaft, handled what the tablet calls the Great Washing, a processing system for water. Modern engineers reading this description have pointed out that any pressurized underwater structure would require exactly this kind of decompression and filtration stage. You can't just open a door at depth and walk in. You need to manage pressure differentials, control water intrusion, process the incoming atmosphere. Whoever designed the Abzu understood this. They built it in from the beginning. The second level is described as the place of breath renewal. The Sumerians used a phrase that translates roughly as purification of the sky within, not the sky outside, the sky inside the structure. Air management, atmosphere regulation. Again, exactly what any long-duration pressurized facility would require. The Sumerians didn't have a word for oxygen recycling, so they called it what it looked like, a place where the inside air was made clean. The third level held what the tablet calls the tablets of all-knowing. Not decorative, not ceremonial, the storage level for information. Whatever knowledge the Anunnaki considered worth preserving indefinitely, it went here. Cataloged in a system the tablet describes as organized by the shape of stars. Whether that was an astronomical index or something more complex, no one has yet been able to determine. But it was a library, a deliberate archive, built into bedrock at a depth specifically chosen for its geological stability. The fourth level is where the descriptions get harder to parse. The Sumerian text uses words associated with living things, biological processes, cultivation. Some researchers have interpreted this as a food production system, hydroponic infrastructure for a long-term occupying population. Others have suggested something far more significant, that the biological processes described on level 4 had to do with genetics, with modification, with the creation or alteration of living organisms. That interpretation has been largely dismissed by mainstream scholars who call it sensationalist reading. But those same scholars have yet to produce a coherent alternative explanation for why a Bronze Age administrative document would use the language of biological cultivation in an architectural context. Levels 5 through 7 are damaged. The tablet is incomplete in those sections. What survives describes walls covered in geometric patterns, chambers the Sumerians called singing rooms, spaces where the stone itself produced a resonant tone, and a central chamber at the lowest level that the text refers to, 4 separate times, as the place where the Anunnaki speak to the earth. Something at the deepest level of the Abzu was in direct communication with the geology of the planet beneath it, drawing from it, responding to it. The Sumerians watched that process and described it in the only terms available to them, the gods listening to the earth. Now here is where the record stops being ancient and starts intersecting with things that happened recently enough to have living witnesses. In 1968, a Soviet research submarine operating in the Persian Gulf detected what its instruments could only describe as an anomalous geometric signal coming from the seafloor at roughly 400 meters depth. The readings showed a structure, not a natural one, regular shapes, repeating patterns, the kind of data signature you get from engineered surfaces, not from rock formations or coral or sediment drift. The coordinates were logged, forwarded to Moscow, and classified at a level that kept them out of public circulation for over 30 years. The official Soviet position was that the readings were instrument error, a malfunction later corrected. That was the position in 1968. The actual classified report told a very different story, and researchers in the 1990s, working through documents released after the Soviet collapse, found it. The Soviet report described a formation at those coordinates as a cluster of cylindrical structures of non-natural origin, the largest of which measured approximately 90 meters in vertical extent, arranged in a pattern consistent with deliberate architectural planning. The report recommended further investigation. That investigation never happened, at least not officially. In 2001, the coordinates from that classified report were leaked by a retired Soviet naval officer who published them in an obscure Russian academic journal that almost nobody read. Turkish archaeologists found the article. And in 2004, a joint Turkish and American Marine survey team went looking for what the Soviets had detected 36 years earlier. They found it. What the 2004 expedition documented at those coordinates was a grouping of 7 cylindrical structures arranged in a hexagonal configuration, 1 at the center and 6 surrounding it, each constructed from a variety of black basalt that does not occur naturally anywhere near the Persian Gulf. The nearest geological source for that specific basalt type is in the Armenian highlands, nearly 800 kilometers away. The structures showed tool marks, not erosion patterns, not natural fracture lines, deliberate cuts made with tools capable of precision that modern engineers found difficult to replicate in basalt of that density. And the scale of the structures matched within a margin consistent with cubit-based measurement, the dimensions recorded on the Sumerian tablet. The expedition lasted 3 weeks before the Turkish government intervened. The site was declared a restricted military zone. All physical samples collected were confiscated. The expedition's lead archaeologist gave a single interview to a regional newspaper before going permanently silent. He said the structures contained internal passages, that sonar scans showed hollow chambers inside each cylinder, and that in one of those chambers, the team had found something that caused the government to pull them out within hours. He would not say what it was. He said only that the Sumerian records were not mythology, and that whoever wrote them had seen exactly what his team had just seen. That interview has never been reproduced in any major publication. The archaeologist has not given another on-record statement since. Here is what the Sumerian tablet says about the entrance specifically, because this is the detail that separates this record from every other ancient text describing underground or submerged realms. The tablet doesn't speak in vague spiritual geography. It gives approach bearings. It describes the entrance as located where the 2 great rivers enter the Bitter Sea, the Tigris and Euphrates meeting the Persian Gulf, and then specifies further, descend to where the fresh water meets the salt beneath the stone. And there you will find the mouth the Anunnaki sealed. The phrase beneath the stone is key. The entrance is not on the sea floor, it is below it, cut through the bedrock beneath the seabed, accessible from a point that in antiquity would have been at or near the coastline before the sea claimed that land. When you account for post-glacial sea level rise, approximately 120 meters of rise globally since the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 BCE, the area the tablet is describing would have been a coastal plain, dry land with river access, a logical place to build the entrance to a deep subsurface facility. The same reason modern engineers bore tunnels through coastal geology rather than constructing on the open seafloor: stability, access, long-term protection. The Anunnaki didn't build on the ocean floor, they built beneath it. The tablet is specific about the construction in ways that should not be possible for a document 5,000 years old. The entrance shaft is described as a structure that manages the weight of water above it through a system the Sumerians called the spine of heaven, something providing vertical structural support while allowing controlled passage through it. Modern subsea tunnel engineers use segmented liner systems that distribute hydrostatic pressure along precisely this kind of framework. The Sumerians didn't have that vocabulary, but they described the engineering principle with enough accuracy that modern engineers who've studied the text have noted the correspondence. The material used for the outer walls is described as something the Anunnaki formed by combining metal, stone, and what the text calls the memory of fire, a phrase appearing across multiple Sumerian records in context describing materials subjected to extreme heat processing. Modern ceramic matrix composites are produced through exactly this kind of high-temperature manufacturing cycle. They are used in deep-sea applications because they resist corrosion, handle extreme pressure differentials, and maintain structural integrity over timescales that metal alone cannot approach. The Sumerians watched the Anunnaki produce something from metal, stone, and fire, and described it the only way they could. The lighting system has received surprisingly little academic attention, given how precisely it maps to known physical phenomena. The Sumerians said the interior chambers were illuminated by stones that held brightness without heat and without consumption. They glowed without burning, without dimming, without ever needing to be replaced. For centuries, that passage was read as poetic invention. Then in 1998, researchers working on piezoelectric materials demonstrated that certain crystalline compounds, when subjected to consistent mechanical stress, emit light continuously. The stress doesn't need to be dramatic. Micro vibrations are sufficient. The sea floor above a geologically active zone and the Persian Gulf sits along a tectonic boundary with persistent low-level seismic activities produces exactly this kind of constant micro vibration. A chamber built into that bedrock and fitted with appropriately chosen crystalline materials would, in theory, produce exactly what the Sumerians described: permanent, heatless, fuel-free illumination powered by the earth itself. The Anunnaki didn't light their facility with fire. They designed it to light itself. The tablet gives considerable detail to the 7 seals, the protective systems securing the structure against the pressures, contaminations, and intrusions that would threaten any long-term underwater installation. The first seal addresses hydrostatic pressure. The second addresses what the Sumerians called the shaking of the deep seismic vibration. The third and fourth describe protection against biological intrusion and atmospheric degradation. The fifth seal is described with language that has baffled translators for over a century. The Sumerian phrase used translates roughly to unseen burning that passes through stone, something that damages living things without being detectable by fire, weight, or touch. Radiation shielding. The Sumerians had no word for radioactive decay, so they described what it did to a living body. The sixth seal addresses what the text calls the slow poison of the outer air, atmospheric filtration. The seventh, the innermost, guards against what the earth below may send upward, geothermal management, or possibly protection against subsurface gas intrusion. What the Sumerians were describing, using Bronze Age vocabulary applied to concepts they had no theoretical framework for, is a multi-layer engineering system that any modern subsea construction team would recognize immediately as a coherent design brief. Pressure management, seismic isolation, biological containment, radiation protection, atmospheric filtration, geothermal insulation. That is not mythology, that is an engineering specification. But here's what bothers the researchers who've spent years with this material. Not the structure itself, not even the technology. What bothers them is the scale of intent behind it. Why build something this sophisticated in this location with this level of permanence? The Sumerians are clear on the answer. The Abzu was not a temporary installation. It was not an outpost or a seasonal camp. It was a foundation. The text uses the Sumerian word kish, which means foundation, not as metaphor, but as structural description. And it was designed from the beginning to operate indefinitely, to outlast everything built above it to function without external maintenance for longer than any human civilization had yet existed at the time it was constructed. The Anunnaki built it to last. The question is, what for? The tablet's answer to that question is where even sympathetic researchers tend to separate. One section describes the Abzu as a repository for the me, the fundamental principles of civilization, the knowledge base from which Sumerian culture emerged, in what looks, from the archaeological record, like an overnight explosion, writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, agriculture, metallurgy, medicine, all appearing in the Sumerian record within a few generations, without the gradual developmental trail that precedes the emergence of any technology through natural human innovation. The mainstream explanation is that the development happened incrementally, and the early records simply haven't survived. The alternate explanation, which the tablet supports directly, is that the knowledge wasn't developed, it was transferred, delivered from a stored archive into a human population that had been specifically selected and prepared to receive it. Another section of the tablet describes the Abzu as a biological repository. The word the Sumerians use is the same word they use for a granary, a place where seeds are stored so that what exists can be restored after destruction. Seeds of what is the question, the text is ambiguous, enough to support multiple interpretations. Seeds of knowledge, seeds of species, seeds of the builders themselves. The Anunnaki, the tablet makes clear, understood that biological continuity requires deliberate preservation. They were not naive about the fragility of civilizations or the regularity of catastrophic resets in planetary history. They had seen it before. They planned for it. And then there is the passage that no institutional archaeologist wants to engage with openly because it requires taking a claim seriously that no tenured academic is willing to attach their name to. The tablet describes a group of Anunnaki who remained behind when the others departed. It calls them the Watchers of the Deep. And it says they entered the Abzu and sealed it from within, not as a retreat, not as a sacrifice, but as a vigil. They went inside and they stayed. The structure was designed to sustain them. The seals were applied from the inside, and they are in there still, according to the text, in a condition the Sumerians describe as the Great Sleep, a biological state that is not death, but is not waking, a preservation that waits for the appointed time. The Book of Enoch, written centuries after the Sumerian tablets, but drawing on sources that overlap significantly with them, describes watchers who descended and remained hidden from human perception, monitoring from concealed positions. The Egyptian pyramid texts speak of the Aku, the shining ones, who withdrew from the world and wait beneath the waters of Nun, the primordial deep, for the moment of the great return. The Mahabharata describes beings who descended below the waters and have not yet come back. These aren't traditions that borrowed from each other. They are records from separate cultures in geographically separate regions, all describing the same event from different vantage points. Beings went underground. Specifically, they went beneath the water. And according to every one of these records, they are still there. In 2015, a team of marine geologists from MIT conducting an unrelated survey of seafloor ecosystems in the Persian Gulf recorded something they did not expect: an electromagnetic field, low frequency, precisely patterned, repeating on a cycle of 18.7 seconds. Not random geological noise, not thermal variability, a signal with regularity. When the data was published, the team attributed it to unknown geological processes. This standard language researchers use when the readings are real, but the explanation is professionally inconvenient. Two members of that research team subsequently resigned their positions and moved to private marine archaeology consultancies. Neither has spoken on record about what they found. One told a journalist off the record that the signal was not geological and that confronting what it actually was, in his words, would be civilizationally destabilizing. The signal originated from the same coordinates where the Soviet submarine detected the geometric anomaly in 1968. The same coordinates where the 2004 Turkish-American expedition found the basalt cylinders before the government ended the project. The same coordinates that, when overlaid with ancient Persian Gulf coastline reconstructions, based on post-glacial sea level data, place them directly adjacent to where the Tigris and Euphrates would have met the ancient shoreline. The point the tablet calls the mouth the Anunnaki sealed, the Sumerians knew where it was, they wrote it down, and the data we keep collecting points back to the same location on the map. Now, a word on the critics, because this field doesn't lack for people making enormous leaps on thin evidence, and the objections deserve to be taken seriously. The standard academic critique of all this is that the Sumerians weren't sophisticated enough to understand what they were describing, that the technical language in the tablet is a post-translation imposition, that modern researchers are reading engineering blueprints into ancient poetry because that is what they want to find. Some of those objections have merit in specific cases. They do. But they can't be applied uniformly without creating a contradiction that mainstream scholarship has never resolved. The Sumerians tracked the movements of all 5 visible planets with enough precision that their records match modern astronomical calculations. They had a base 60 numerical system capable of computing compound interest and calculating square roots. They documented the heliocentric structure of the solar system 4,000 years before Copernicus made it acceptable to say it out loud. They were not primitive observers making fortunate guesses. They were systematic recorders of what they saw and what they were taught. Treating their technical documents as allegory while accepting their astronomical records as accurate is not a consistent position. You don't get to apply rigor selectively to only the portions that confirm what you already believe. There's also the genetic record, which keeps emerging in discussions of the Sumerian timeline in ways that institutional archaeology has struggled to incorporate cleanly. A study published in 2018 analyzed ancient DNA from populations across the Middle East and have found genetic markers appearing in the archaeological record around 5000 BCE, the same period as the Sumerian cultural explosion, that don't match any known migration pattern, don't trace to any identifiable founding population, and cluster specifically in the coastal regions of what was ancient Sumer. The study's authors noted the anomaly and moved on without speculating about origin. But the markers are there, sudden in their appearance, geographically concentrated in exactly the area where the tablet says the Abzu entrance was located and where the Anunnaki allegedly ran their human education program. Anomalous DNA in the right place at the right time is not proof. But it isn't nothing. What would it mean if the Abzu is real? If the structure the tablet describes actually exists, as the physical evidence increasingly suggests it does, what does that change? It changes the origin story of human civilization. It means the knowledge transfer the Sumerians documented, the sudden appearance of writing, mathematics, astronomy, and law in a culture that had no apparent developmental runway, wasn't the product of natural human innovation, but the output of a deliberate program conducted by beings who understood those disciplines at a level we are still working to match. It means the earliest human cities were built according to specifications handed down by beings who are no longer visible but may not be gone. And it means somewhere beneath the floor of the Persian Gulf, sealed by technology we cannot yet replicate, there is a structure that has been functioning, maintaining itself, and possibly still occupied for at least 12,000 years. The 2004 expedition sonar scans before confiscation showed that the interior chambers of the basalt cylinders were dry at 400 meters depth after 12 millennia underwater, dry and intact. Whatever the builders used to pressure seal and waterproof those structures, it is still working. The seals are holding. The MIT electromagnetic signal is still transmitting. 18.7-second intervals, regular, patterned, not degrading, active. The tablet ends with a statement that researchers have interpreted in different ways depending on their willingness to take the text at face value. It says the Abzu will open when the time of preparation is complete, when humanity has built enough to be trusted with what it contains. The opening will not require human intervention. The seals will release when the appointed conditions are met, not unlocked from outside, released from within. The Sumerians didn't write that as prophecy. They wrote it as information, something they had been told, something they carved into clay because they understood it was important for whoever came after them to know. Because there would come a point in human development where it would matter, where the people reading it would finally have enough context to understand what they were reading. We are whoever came after them, and the conditions they described, a civilization capable of understanding what the Abzu contains, technologically advanced enough to engage with the knowledge within it, far enough along in its development to be ready for the truth of its own origins, look more like the present moment than any previous point in human history. The tablets are not mythology, they are records. The structure they are describing is still down there, 400 meters below the surface of the Persian Gulf, sealed in basalt and something stronger than anything we currently produce, transmitting a signal every 18 seconds into water that most of humanity will never look at twice, waiting. The Sumerians called it the foundation of the world. They said everything we know came out of it, and based on everything the evidence keeps telling us, they were right. If this kind of history, the kind that's been sitting in museum storage wings for over a century, while the mainstream looks the other way, is what you want to understand, subscribe. Every week I'm pulling the thread on what the ancient records actually say versus what we've been told they say. And the next video takes this further than today did. It's on screen right now.